Sawadee Kap. Hello and welcome to Daily Wisdom, Walking the Path with the Buddha. Today is our group learning program, and what I'll be doing is sharing the teachings of the Buddha with you guys based on the first book of our book series, Developing a Life Practice, The Path That Leads to Enlightenment. What I do in this program is every Sunday I go chapter by chapter in our book series, helping students to be able to understand the entire path to enlightenment. What I'm doing here at the very beginning of this group learning program is I'm doing a real deep, in-depth teaching on the Eightfold Path. The Eightfold Path is the core central teaching of the Buddha, and I've been breaking it down into 3 individual sections, helping students to be able to understand the wisdom section, the moral conduct section, and then tonight is going to be the mental discipline section. So I'd like to welcome all of you guys, whether you're joining for the first time or you're joining regularly, whether you're joining in Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, whether you're listening to this on the replay, welcome to everybody, because by understanding this mental discipline section of the Eightfold Path, it's going to help you to be able to put all the rest of the Eightfold Path into practice. The way that we start our class is we start with meditation. I'm going to be starting with some chanting to be able to ease the mind into meditation. Then I'll be guiding you in a meditation session. There'll be a period of time of quietness where we're all meditating. Then we'll come out of that with some more chanting. And that's where I'll start today's class, helping you to be able to understand the mental discipline section of the Eightfold Path. So if you'd like to join for meditation, take whatever position is comfortable for you. And then afterwards, I'll come in with the guidance. Arahang Samma Sambuddho Mahakawa Wat Tung Mahakawanang Apiwateyami Sawakato Mahakawata Tammo Dhammang Namasami Supatipano Mahakavato Sawaka Sangho Sanghang Namami Namo Rasa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Rasa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Rasa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Iti piso emakawa Arahang Samma Sambuddho Vicacaranang sammuno Sakato rokavitu Anutero purisa Dhamma sati satatawa Manusarang Bhutto Bhagavati. Okay, with the lower body and hands and arms comfortable, and the upper body erect. Just close the eyes and start breathing in through the nose and out through the nose. Here you're just looking to establish the breath, a nice, natural, steady, consistent breath. Not forced or controlled, just a gradual inhale through the nose, experiencing the full breath. And then whenever you're ready, exhale out through the nose. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. Your breath may not match up with the guidance that I'm providing, and that's okay. This is your practice. I'm just here for guidance. You can use this voice as a reminder. Whenever you get to the next inhale, breathing gradually through the nose, developing a nice, natural, steady, consistent breath. And then whenever you're ready, exhale out through the nose, experiencing the full breath. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. With the breath well established, start fixating the mind on the breath, either the sound of the breath coming into the nose or the sensation of air moving over the skin into the nose. The breath is the present moment. Fixate the mind on the breath, the present moment. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. With the mind fixated on the breath, whenever you notice that it moves off the breath, cut that off, let it go, and come back to the breath, the present moment. No need to observe the thought, label it, judge it, analyze it, or even try to figure out where it's coming from. Whenever you notice that the mind is moved off the breath, cut that off, let it go, and come back to the breath, the present moment. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. I'm going to be quiet now and let you do this work of focusing on the breath, cutting off and letting go anytime the mind moves off the breath. You have nowhere to go. There's nothing to do. No one needs you right now. This is your time to focus on the breath. Breathing in and out. สัมมาสัมพุทโธมหาเขวาปุตังมหาเขวันหังอภิวาเตวิสวากขาโตมหาเขวตาธัมโมธัมมังนามัสสามิสุปฏิปันโนมหาเขวโตสาวกสังโฆสังฆังนามามินะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะอิติปิโสมหาเขวาอะระหังสัมมาสัมพุทโธวิชาจารนังสัมมุโนสกขาโตโรกาวิตุอนุเตโรปุริสาดัมมาสติสัตตาตาวามนุสรังพุทโธภะคะวะติ If you guys would like to slowly make your way out of meditation. Once again, welcome to all of you guys. Nice to see everybody in class, whether you're at the temple or online. Welcome to all of you guys. As I was sharing at the beginning of class, I have been teaching a 3-part series to be able to help students to be able to understand the Eightfold Path. There's this core central teaching of the Eightfold Path that is going to guide the mind to this enlightened mental state. The enlightened mental state is where the mind's completely peaceful, calm, serene, and content with joy. You'll no longer experience any discontent feelings by the time you get there. Meditation is an important part of that, but you wouldn't be able to just meditate your way to enlightenment. So this meditation that we just did is something that you would like to build up where you're doing this daily, not just in class, but you're going to need to have this practice where you're doing this daily on your own. We're doing it in class in order to be able to help people build up their practice, but you're going to need to be practicing meditation on a regular basis. I'm going to help you to understand this today as we finish up the Eightfold Path in this part 3 of 3, where I'm going to be teaching you the mental discipline section. Because meditation fits into this Eightfold Path, but there's much more than just meditation that you need. And I'm going to help you to see where meditation fits into this. So I've been teaching the wisdom section and moral conduct section. And tonight I'm going to go through the mental discipline section, helping students to be able to understand that. The wisdom section helps you to be able to understand that it's your own mind that's causing these feelings, that it's not the outside world. Oftentimes people think that it's the outside world. It's your mother, your father, your brothers, sisters, your boss, or other people that are causing these feelings. But with right view, you learn that that's not true. And then you learn about right intention. These are things that you need to be able to understand based in the way that I taught them previously. Because then after you understand the wisdom section, you move into the moral conduct section, because you realize that your harsh and hostility, your bitterness, all of this stuff, it's actually coming from your own mind. People oftentimes feel justified in their speech and their actions, the way that they're functioning in their relationships, but it's just causing damage in your relationships. And you would like to get to a point where you're not doing that any longer, where you're able to speak in wise ways and your bodily actions are wise. You're not causing harm through speech, actions, or livelihood. Because in the unenlightened state, if you think that it's other people who are causing you to be angry, you might feel justified in the way that you function. But as you put out that bitterness and hostility, it's all just coming back to you. So in the moral conduct section of the Eightfold Path, the Buddha helps you to understand wise speech, wise actions, and wise livelihood so that you're not causing harm to other beings. And over time, this is going to produce more and more helpfulness for you to be able to develop harmonious relationships and a peaceful and joyful mind as well. And part of this that you're learning is about not causing harm and being gentle. But how could you be gentle if you don't have the mental discipline to do it? So that's where this mental discipline section comes in. Because it's one thing to sit around in a classroom and in a temple and online with other people who are interested in cultivating wholesome qualities and talking about that, yeah, let's be loving and kind and compassionate and gentle and all these other things that the Buddha teaches. But it's a whole nother thing to go out into the world and actually do it. So that's where the mental discipline section comes in, that it's going to teach you how to actually train your mind and get to a point where you can actually implement the wise decisions about how you interact with people. And that's where you're going to see more and more improvement in your life. So just like always, I'm going to be using the original words of the Buddha here to be able to help students to be able to understand right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. When you're studying the teachings of the Buddha, you would like to use these original words. And I know that sounds pretty obvious. For some people, when they hear that, they're like, well, of course, what else would I do? Well, you'd be surprised how many people in the world don't actually study the original words of the Buddha, even though they might consider themselves to be Buddhist or even a Buddhist monk or living in a monastery and things like this, but they don't actually study his original words. So when you're learning and practicing his teachings, you need to be able to see what did he teach and what he didn't teach. So I'm going to help you guys to be able to understand the rest of this Eightfold Path using the original words of the Buddha so you can see what did he teach, and then you'll know what he's talking about. Because he didn't teach rites, rituals, ceremonies, worship, and prayer. He didn't teach rules and commandments. He didn't teach a bunch of beliefs. He taught you to do this inner work, this inner growth, this inner development, becoming a better person today. Instead of, believing a bunch of things and hoping something good happens when you die, you're learning, growing, and developing, becoming a better person day by day through training of your mind. And you'll see this in his teachings here. So we'll start with right effort. Here's the words of the Buddha. In what, monks, is right effort? Here, monks, a monk rouses his will, makes an effort, stirs up energy, exerts his mind, and strives to prevent the arising of unarisen, evil, unwholesome mental states. He rouses his will, makes an effort, stirs up energy, exerts his mind, and strives to overcome evil, unwholesome mental states that have arisen. He rouses his will, makes an effort, stirs up energy, exerts his mind, and strives to produce unarisen, wholesome mental states. He rouses his will, makes an effort, stirs up energy, exerts his mind, and strives to maintain wholesome mental states that have arisen, not to let them fade away, to bring them to greater growth, to the full perfection of development. This is called right effort. So he's talking about 4 things here that you're going to need to apply effort in order to be able to make your way to this enlightened mental state. You can't just stumble your way into enlightenment. You're going to need to apply effort. And there's 4 efforts that he talks about here. I'm going to help you guys to understand what these are, and I'm going to share with you examples so that you'll understand how to apply this factor in your day-to-day life. So the first part of right effort, he's talking about preventing unwholesome mental states that have not arisen from arising in the mind. So there's certain unwholesome mental states that are not currently in your mind right now. And a good example of that is like killing another human being, that you probably have no interest in doing that whatsoever. It's the farthest thing from your mind right now. And what you're going to need to do is apply the effort to prevent that type of thing from ever coming into your mind. Anything that's not currently in your mind that is unwholesome, you're going to need to apply the effort and not allow that to ever come into the mind. Because once it comes into the mind, then you might act upon it, and it's going to lead to all kinds of unwholesome results. So this is the first part of this. The second part is to abandon unwholesome mental states that have arisen in the mind. Because if your mind is currently experiencing anger, sadness, frustration, and all these other discontent feelings, your mind is currently unenlightened, which means that you have certain unwholesome mental states. And you're going to need to apply the effort to eliminate those whenever they're arising. For example, let's just say somebody was in an existing relationship and they have a craving to go outside that relationship in order to have sex with another person. Well, if you have that craving that's coming up in your mind, that's unwholesome. And it's going to produce unwholesome results if you allow your mind to then act upon it through your intentions, your speech, and your actions. So when you see that unwholesome quality coming up in your mind, you'd like to apply the effort to cut that off and let it go, eliminating it out of your mind. Or like anger, frustration, or irritation. If you're noticing that coming up in your mind, you're going to need to cut that off and let it go. Apply the effort to let it go. That's abandoning this unwholesome quality. Then you'd like to produce unarisen, wholesome mental states to arise in the mind. There are certain wholesome mental states that are not currently in your mind right now. And you're going to learn as part of this path that there's certain wholesome mental states you're going to need to cultivate and bring into the mind. And if you don't apply the effort to do that, you wouldn't actually be able to get to enlightenment. So for example, you're going to learn about generosity, how this is an important mental state to cultivate in the mind. This is the giving and sharing of more than is strictly required in any given situation without any expectation of anything in return, such as your time, effort, energy, and resources. If you're having craving, desire, attachment in your mind, which unenlightened beings do, the mind tends to be very selfish. It tends to hold on to things. It's like my money, my phone, my boyfriend, my girlfriend, my clothes, my jewelry, mine, 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 mine. Everything's mine, and the mind holds on to it. And you're not going to get to enlightenment this way, because you can only be happy when you get what you want, and you'll get angry and frustrated when you don't get what you want. So the mind needs to learn how to let go. That's what that meditation is for that we just did, but also your generosity is that too. That is training your mind to let go. So if you notice that your mind has selfishness, you're going to need to apply the effort to bring this in to the mind so that you can practice generosity on a daily basis. Then there's compassion. This is an example of a wholesome quality that may not be in your mind right now. If you have compassion, this is the middle. But on one side of compassion is indifference. Indifference would be like, oh, look at that homeless person. I don't care. It's not my mom or dad, right? That's the indifference. On the other side of this is worry and anxiety, where you're maybe worrying about those children that don't have food, and you're so worried that they're going to not be able to eat tonight. This is the two opposite sides of the spectrum. What you would like to do is come to the middle, where you're practicing compassion. What compassion is the concern for the misfortune of others. Compassion doesn't produce discontent feelings. So that worry and anxiety that you have, that those children don't have food, that's because the mind hasn't cultivated compassion, that it's still having craving, desire, attachment. And that person that you're indifferent about, that you could care less about the misfortunes that they're experiencing, that's because the mind doesn't have compassion. So you need to bring the mind to the middle, where it's practicing compassion, the concern for the misfortune of others. This is a mental state that you're cultivating. Whether you choose to do something about the misfortune that this person is experiencing, that's a whole separate question. That's a matter of whether you're going to practice generosity or not. But your mind needs to maintain this wholesome quality of compassion. So if you currently don't have compassion in your mind, you're going to need to apply the effort to bring that in, just as an example. Then the fourth one here is maintaining wholesome mental states that have arisen, not allowing them to fade away, and work to increase their growth in the mind. So this is where any wholesome qualities that are currently in your mind, you're going to need to support them, encourage them. Don't allow them to fade. Bring them to full growth, full perfection, and full development. Because even as an unenlightened being, there's certain wholesome qualities that are in your mind right now, but they haven't been brought to full growth, full perfection, and full development. For example, loving kindness. You probably have loving kindness in the mind. This is a genuine interest in seeing all beings be well, a active goodwill towards others. where you don't have judgment against others and you're not judging them to determine if they deserve your loving kindness or not, but you're just being loving and kind with them. This is unconditional love. You probably have this to a certain degree in some situations, but in other situations, you become bitter and harsh and hostile. This is the anger that the loving kindness hasn't been brought to full growth, full perfection, and full development. So by the time your loving kindness is permeating in the mind, that's where the mind is actually applied enough right effort that the mind has now been brought to full growth, full perfection, and full development with loving kindness, that in every single situation, your mind can be loving and kind. There's no situation where your mind doesn't have that. That's what you would like to be doing, is applying the effort to bring this wholesome quality up in the mind more and more so that it's permeating in the mind and always there. Same thing with something like sympathetic joy. You probably have sympathetic joy in your mind. This is joy for others' success, even if you didn't contribute to it. This is the opposite of jealousy or envy. So if you have jealousy or envy, then the mind is having some craving. Maybe your neighbor got a brand new car and you really wanted that car, and now you're jealous or envious, right? Or maybe somebody got a job at work that you really wanted that job. That's the mind's jealousy or envy. Maybe in other situations, you have sympathetic joy. Maybe somebody's interested in going on a trip, like to Thailand or something like that, and you've already been to Thailand. And you're like, oh, that's wonderful. Pleased to hear that. Have a great time, right? You can be joyful for their success. You're not jealous because you've already done it, right? But in this other situation where someone has a car or someone's gotten a job that you wanted, that's your craving. That's arising that jealousy. And that's going to come out in your intention, speech, and actions. And it can potentially damage your relationships if you're experiencing that. So where you see that your mind has jealousy or envy and it doesn't have sympathetic joy, you're going to need to apply the effort to bring this into the mind where you have joy for others' success, even if you didn't contribute to it. So these are examples that I'm using here in order to be able to help you understand right effort. The things that are wholesome or unwholesome that are in your mind, that's what you're going to need to figure out. And the next factor is going to help you to be able to do that. But before I move on, let me just pause here and see if anybody has any questions about right effort. You can put that into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or you can raise your hand in Zoom and ask any questions that you like. Hello from Thailand. Hello, people in Germany. It looks like people are saying hello from Germany. Okay, I don't see any questions anywhere. All right. So I'm going to move into the next chapter, the next factor, which is right mindfulness, because you actually wouldn't be able to practice right effort without right mindfulness. So here, these are the words of the Buddha. After I read it, then I'll break it down for you, help you to understand it. He says, in what, monks, is right mindfulness? Here, monks, a monk resides reflecting on body as body, dedicated, clearly aware and mindful, having put aside craving and worry for the world. He resides reflecting on feelings as feelings, dedicated, clearly aware and mindful, having put aside craving and worry for the world. He resides reflecting on mind as mind, dedicated, clearly aware and mindful, having put aside craving and worry for the world. He resides reflecting on mental objects as mental objects, dedicated, clearly aware and mindful, having put aside craving and worry for the world. This is called right mindfulness. So he's talking about four things here. Body is body, feelings as feelings, mind as mind, and mental objects as mental objects. What he's talking about is the four foundations of mindfulness. But I'm going to help you to understand mindfulness in general before we talk about the four foundations of mindfulness. Oftentimes, this word is being used in ways that the Buddha didn't use it. And if people choose to use it in that way, that's fine. They can use it however they like, but it can be confusing for you if you understand it in the way that people are using it. Instead, understand it in the way that the Buddha is using it, because that's what's going to help you to get to enlightenment. Right mindfulness in general is awareness of mind, where you would like to build general awareness of your thoughts, your ideas, the things that are going on in your mind. Because in the unenlightened state, we oftentimes lack that awareness. We tend to just plow through life without really thinking about the things that we're doing and how we're doing it, and whether or not there's even harm that other people are experiencing because of your decisions. So instead, you need to have this awareness of your mind, your thoughts, your ideas, and things of this nature. Now, what some people will say is they will say, can you mindfully carry this bottle to the table? What they're really saying is, can you carefully carry this glass of water to the table, or this bottle of water to the table, right? They're replacing the word careful with mindful, right? That's not how the Buddha used this. The way that the Buddha used the word mindful is awareness of mind. And that's what you would like to cultivate, that more and more you become aware of the mind. But then in more detail, you would like to develop what's called the 4 foundations of mindfulness, that you can be aware of the bodily sensations, the feelings, the condition of the mind, and the mental objects. What the bodily sensations are here is this is an early warning system, alerting you that you're about to get angry, you're about to get frustrated or irritated or annoyed or some other discontent feeling. Prior to you experiencing the feeling of anger, there's something that's happening that you may or may not be aware of. There's bodily sensations. For something like anger, it's usually tingling in the body, rising up towards the head. There's tightening in the chest, tightening in the throat, heat in the face, pressure in the skull. This is the early warning system alerting you that you're about to get angry or frustrated. And what the Buddha teaches you to do is apply right effort to cut off and let go at the bodily sensations. You're not suppressing your feelings or repressing them. You're cutting it off and letting it go before it even becomes a feeling. That your mind hasn't actually experienced the feeling yet. This is the kind of precursor, or this is the early warning system alerting you that you're about to experience the feeling. And that's why you would like to cut it off there. You're essentially rewiring the mind, not allowing it to experience this anger and frustration. And over time, you'll get to a point where anger doesn't even arise. If you cut it off and let it go enough, eventually anger doesn't even arise because it's completely gone. But in this training period, whenever you notice the arising of any kind of discontent feelings, you're going to need to cut it off and let it go as a bodily sensation. It's kind of like if you were in a boat and you were going from the UK to Canada and you were out in the middle of the sea, you would like to prevent the water from ever coming into the boat. Once the water comes into the boat, you've got a real problem to deal with. You've got to get it out. But if you can prevent it from ever coming into the boat, you can sail smoothly from the UK to Canada. So it's the same thing as once the anger is in the mind, it's really hard to get rid of it from that point. So more and more, you would like to develop the ability to cut off and let go at the bodily sensations. This can sometimes take multiple months and years to train to get to that point where you can notice these bodily sensations and cut it off and let it go easily at that stage. You're going to miss it as a bodily sensation sometimes because your mind isn't fully trained yet, and it's going to become a feeling. And if it becomes a feeling, that's where you apply right effort to cut it off and let it go there, right? That's the next best option. If you miss it there as a feeling, it's going to start affecting the condition of your mind for multiple minutes, hours, days, weeks. If you've ever been grumpy or irritable for like a week or two, this is because we didn't have the wisdom to cut it off at the bodily sensations or the feelings. So it affected the condition of our mind. And then if you don't cut it off and let it go at the condition of your mind, then it's going to start feeding what's called a mental object. What a mental object is a deeply rooted container in the mind. In this example, it's ill will. These are the 10 fetters. This is what I'm going to be teaching next week as part of our program. These are 10 individual pollutions that the mind has that need to be uprooted. So you're going to need to develop awareness of the symptoms of these mental objects. And now as you become aware of these symptoms, you can actually apply right effort to cut it off and let it go. So the Buddha is teaching you the life cycle that discontentedness is actually taking here. That it's first going to start out as a bodily sensation. It hasn't become a feeling yet. Then it's going to become a feeling. Then it's going to affect the condition of your mind. Then it's going to feed these mental objects. And what he's teaching you to do is put a blockade at the bodily sensations so that you no longer allow the mind to experience the conditioned feeling, that you're rewiring the mind so it doesn't continue to stay wired that way. So the bodily sensations are this early warning system saying, I'm about to get angry. I'm about to get angry. I'm about to get frustrated. I'm about to get irritated. And you say, nope, not going to let you do that. You apply right effort, say, nope, not going to let you do that, right? Because then you protect your mind. You preserve your mind, right? So the way that this looks in day-to-day life, I'll give you a real life example, is let's just say you're sitting on a sofa and you're watching the news and you're taking this in through your eyes and your ears. And maybe you hear something that's on the TV that you disagree with. Maybe you hear about someone getting murdered or raped, or maybe there's a war that breaks out. And now when you notice that, you start to notice these bodily sensations because you're sitting there on the sofa, paying attention to your mind with your mindfulness, and you notice this tingling in the body, tightening in the chest, tightening in the throat, heat in the face, or pressure in the skull. Well, rather than just sit there and dwell in that, turn off the news, go for a walk, go for a bike ride, go to the bathroom, go to the kitchen and get a glass of water. Don't allow the mind to dwell in that because you know it's going to become a feeling. You're disinterested in doing that. And if you do this enough where you're redirecting the mind, applying this right effort because of your right mindfulness, is being aware of this, eventually you'll get to the point where these feelings don't ever arise. There's no bodily sensations there because you've eliminated the causes and conditions that are producing the feelings to arise. So you can completely transform the mind and get to the point where you can watch the news calmly and that you don't experience anger and frustration. But you're going to need to go through this training period where whenever you notice that the mind's about to experience a conditioned feeling, that you redirect the mind and you take it in another direction. So let me know what questions you guys have here on right mindfulness. Remember, you can put that into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or at the temple, you can use the microphones and ask questions that way. Okay, we have a question coming in on YouTube here. The question is, how can I know if a mental state is unwholesome? Unwholesome mental states are craving, anger, and what we call ignorance. This is the unknowing of true reality. This is something that you're going to learn as part of the 3 poisons. But since you're on our YouTube channel, if you'd like to search for the 3 poisons, you will learn about these 3 unwholesome mental states: craving, anger, and ignorance. Okay, those are the 3 that you're looking for. But also, you need to be looking at the mind and understanding whether or not what you're about to do is going to cause harm, right? Before you do something, you need to be considering whether or not you're causing harm. You can't cause somebody else to be discontent, like angry, sad, or frustrated, but you can cause them harm. Causing someone harm is to cause harm to their physical body, their material possessions, or their reputation. Anytime that you're actually causing harm, this is coming from your craving, your anger, and your ignorance, the unknowing of true reality. So you would like to cut that off and let it go. So that's how you can understand that. Okay, I don't see any questions anywhere else. Okay, so your right effort is applying that effort to cut off and let go or arise certain wholesome qualities in the mind. Your right mindfulness is watching over your mind so that you can then apply the right effort. But you wouldn't be able to have right mindfulness if it wasn't for this next step, right concentration. Here, these are the words of the Buddha where he's explaining the results of having put together all the factors of the Eightfold Path. He's describing something called the jhanas. These are phases that your mind goes through prior to getting to the first stage of enlightenment. And these are enhanced qualities of mind that you need in order to be able to make your way further on the path to enlightenment. So he's not describing here how to practice right concentration. Instead, he's explaining if you put together all the steps of the Eightfold Path, what will you then be experiencing? Because that's an indication for you that you've been putting together the Eightfold Path well. So instead of reading this and teaching you this, because I teach this in other programs, I'm going to actually teach you how to actually practice right concentration. Practicing right concentration is described in other parts of the teachings of the Buddha. He teaches you to develop a daily meditation practice and practice singleness of mind. These are 2 things that you're going to need to develop in order to be able to develop this focus and concentration, because that's what's going to allow you to bring forth all your wisdom to apply all the other steps of the Eightfold Path. So you're going to need a daily meditation practice of breathing mindfulness meditation, where you're building up to 2 or 3 sessions per day for about 30 minutes. And that can sound like a lot for some people, but if you look at your life, there is probably unbeneficial things that you're doing that you could scale back. Maybe you're looking at social media excessively, or maybe you're searching YouTube videos endlessly. If you scaled that back and did it in more moderation, you'll be able to see that you actually have more time available to you to be able to train your mind with something like meditation. You usually build up your breathing mindfulness meditation practice for about 4 to 8 weeks. Then you start bringing in the loving kindness meditation. These are 2 meditations that you're going to need in addition to 2 other specialized meditations. That not everybody needs these, but you're going to learn about them as part of this program. When we get to chapter 11, I'll be teaching all 4 meditations that the Buddha taught. So you're going to need to develop this meditation practice. And that's why each class we do meditation on Sundays and Wednesdays so that you can be building up your meditation practice, but you're going to need to do this on your own as well. Then there's practicing singleness of mind. This is doing just one thing at a time. Oftentimes people have been taught to multitask and they think that that's actually possible, where it's not actually possible. You can't do more than one thing at a time. You can only do one thing at a time. And that's what you would actually like to be focused on. People think that they're actually becoming more productive by doing more than one thing at a time. But in reality, your mind can only do one thing at a time. If you're doing multiple things, you're doing one thing for 3 to 5 seconds, and then you're rapidly cycling to something else for 3 to 5 or 8 seconds. And then you're rapidly cycling to something else for 10 seconds. So your mind's racing around like this, right? And if you do this all day long at work, well, when you come home, it's very hard to relax, right? And it's the same thing like a racehorse. If you've ever been to a racetrack, when they race around the racetrack, when they go to the barn, they can't calm down. They're all hyped up, right? It's the same thing with your mind. If you're racing around like that, when you come home from work, of course you're stressed. Of course you have anxiety. Of course you have difficulties resting and relaxing and getting a good night's sleep because your mind's been racing around all day long. You would actually like to slow it down and just do one thing at a time. And you'll actually be way more productive doing one thing at a time than you would have been if you tried to do multiple things. Because when you're trying to do multiple things, you're tripping over your feet, you're making all kinds of mistakes. You got to go back and clean that up later. It doesn't really result in what it is that you're thinking that it's going to result in. So you'd like to just do one thing at a time. And the way that I think about this and practicing singleness of mind is that if you were washing dishes and your mind was wandering, well, you'd like to cut that off and let it go, right? Because if you're sitting there washing dishes and you're thinking about something else, well, next thing you know, you've cut your hand and now you got to go to the hospital and you got to get stitches and it's going to take you more time. Or if you're in a business meeting and your boss is up there talking and you're thinking about a trip to Thailand that you're going to take in 3 to 6 months, well, that's not helping you in the business meeting. It's not helping you to advance in your career. So cut that off. That's your mindfulness that's going to see your mind has wandered like that. And then it's your right effort to cut it off and let it go and just do one thing at a time. So if you had a piece of wood and you had a steel rod and you were grinding this back and forth, when you first start doing this, it's going to bounce around a lot because there's no groove there yet. But if you grind this steel rod back and forth enough, eventually you're going to get a groove. And now when it pops out, you're going to know that and you can bring it right back. But if you grind that steel rod back and forth enough, eventually you're going to get such a deep groove, it's never going to pop out. And that's the way that your mind works too. That if you start practicing singleness of mind, right now it might be bouncing around a lot. But if you grind it back and forth enough, if you stay focused and you practice this, what I'm sharing with you frequently, eventually your mind's going to be so focused and so concentrated, it's never going to pop out. That your mind is just always focused and concentrated. You'll have clarity of mind. Okay, so this is right concentration, developing a meditation practice and developing singleness of mind. So let me pause here and see what questions you guys have. You can ask anything you like about the teachings that I've been sharing with you today, whether it's right effort, right mindfulness, or right concentration. So it looks like the folks at Wat Tung have a question. You guys are going to need to unmute yourself in order to be able to ask a question and use the microphone as well.
Hello. I had a question about cutting it off and letting it go. because I kind of look back at the meditation when my thoughts drifted from my breath and I was able to cut it off and go back to the breath. Let's say I was in a situation where either someone shouted at me or I'd missed the bus or something. I guess before I get to the feeling, or before I get the sensation, I want to kind of, how the mechanism of cutting it off, is it simply just to get rid of the thought, or to focus on my breathing, or distract myself? How would you best describe how to cut it off?
It's all of that stuff. When you first get started, redirecting the mind is the best way to do it, right? Like say somebody cut you off in traffic, you get stopped at a stoplight and you're noticing the anger starting to arise. Just look to your left and look at that beautiful house, or look at that tree, or look at that beautiful view, and just completely forget that that guy's riding off in the distance and he got the green light and you didn't, right? Just forget about it and just redirect the mind. So you'd like to redirect the mind, but eventually you'll be able to get to the point, if you're doing meditation enough and you're practicing generosity enough and you're redirecting your mind like this, you'll be able to internally almost like snap your fingers and cut that thought off. But that takes time to build up to that point. But in the meantime, you like to redirect the mind. Over time, build that internal mechanism in your mind through meditation and generosity, and then redirecting your mind that you can internally cut it off and let it go.
Also, I've been in situations where I've been able to apply this technique, but then when I've removed myself from the situation, suddenly the thought will remanifest. And then I can start to dwell on it, which is, I guess, when I need to cut it off and let it go again. And just keep repeating this over and over every time it comes back. So I've noticed with me, some things I can let go, and that's it. I've let it go. But other times, it's like there's unfinished business, or there's something in my mind that isn't able to let it go. So it will keep coming back. I'll do the process, but then an hour later, it will creep back into my mind. And I guess that's an untrained mind, isn't it? And I just need to keep practicing. Is that right?
Exactly. This is what we call, you need to cut it off and let it go so that it's no longer subject to future arising. Because if you cut it off and it takes an hour for it to come back up again, that means it's not completely out of your mind yet. You cut it off and you kind of knocked it down, but the dust kind of got kicked up again an hour later. So you've got to cut it off again. So anytime it comes up, even if it's a week later, cut it off and let it go. So even though we say cut it off and let it go, it's really cut it off and 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 cut it off. And eventually down the road, your mind will let it go. And you'll get better and better at this the more that you're practicing with the meditation, the generosity, and all the other things that you're learning on the path.
I think that my final question is, for me, sometimes I feel there's an unresolved issue, or sometimes I need to kind of process something that happened before I can let it go. So then I have to kind of think it through in order to be able to have closure on it and then let it go. Is that something that you would not recommend, or you would recommend?
If there's discontentedness in the mind, you'd like to cut off the discontentedness and let it go.
Yeah.
If there's something that you need to think about and reflect on in order to be able to make a decision later, your mind's going to be better at that because it's going to be calm later. So cut off and let go of the discontentedness. And then if it's a few hours, a few days later that you need to think about it and reflect on it in order to be able to make a wise decision, then do that. There's no harm in doing that. You're just not interested in doing it with the discontentedness, because the discontentedness is polluting your ability to be able to see clearly and make a wise decision.
That makes sense, because there's times when I didn't want to say anything or act out because of high emotions or feelings, and I've given it a day or two and then got more perspective of the situation. And sometimes when I felt wrong had been done to me, I have ended up apologizing to that person because I could suddenly see it from their point of view. So I guess sometimes time and distance and cutting off the feelings really helps to get perspective.
Exactly. Exactly. It allows your mind to arise wisdom, because when your mind is shaken up and it's uncalm, you don't have mindfulness or awareness of mind. When you don't have mindfulness or awareness of mind, you don't have concentration and focus and clarity. And that means you can't access your wisdom to make wise decisions. So anytime your mind is shaken up, you're not interested in making decisions during that period of time. You would like to calm the mind down first. And sometimes that can take days, before you get to that point. Over time, you'll get to a point where you won't have that, right? It'll just be so easy for you. But in the meantime, you've got to give yourself that space to put pause on that particular decision, allow your mind to regain its composure, and then you can see clearly and make wise decisions.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Got another question here.
Sure.
Hi, I have a question regarding what you said about watching the news and watching something that might be triggering and then removing yourself from that situation to avoid being triggered. What's the difference then with choosing to be ignorant to important things that are happening in the world for your own peace of mind?
Yeah, that's not choosing to be ignorant to what's going on in the world. It's choosing to protect your contentedness. Because if your mind is discontent, like we were just talking about, it's all shaken up. You're all angry, you're frustrated. And now this boils over into other situations and you're making unwise decisions. So it's not a choice to be ignorant about what's going on in the world, because you can find out what's going on in the world just fine. But as long as you're doing it with anger and frustration, that's not producing any beneficial results. So you would like to redirect the mind, training the mind that, hey, if you would like to watch this news, you're going to need to be calm, because there's the body, there's the mind, and then there's the person. The person needs to be like the adult in the room, because the mind is going to throw a temper tantrum. It sees something on the news that it doesn't like and is throwing a temper tantrum. And what you're doing as the adult in the room is you're taking the mind out for a walk, allowing it to calm down. And then at some point in the future, whether it's a few minutes, a few hours, or a few days, you can digest that content to be able to understand what's going on in the world. But you're training your mind that, hey, I'm only going to allow you to do this when you're calm, because the emotions doesn't actually help anything whatsoever. So you're not choosing to be ignorant about what's going on in the world. Instead, you're actually doing just the opposite. This path to enlightenment is all about cultivation of wisdom. But in that moment where the mind is throwing a temper tantrum, go take it out for a walk, let it calm down, and then digest the content later when the mind's prepared to do that, but only allow it to do it when it's calm. And now over time, it gets trained to only be calm when it's digesting this type of content.
I think what I've struggled with is associating maybe an emotional reaction to challenging things like that you see in the news, and associating that with caring. So if you have an emotional reaction, it's because you care. But I suppose you can still care without having an emotional reaction.
Exactly. This is because your mind hasn't learned the Four Noble Truths yet, and you haven't penetrated into right view. And being able to understand what's actually causing these feelings is not your care. It's not care that causes these feelings. It's your craving, desire, attachment. The mind's craving permanence. It wants things to be a certain way, and it can only be happy if it gets things that way. But the thing is that the world is impermanent. Things are constantly changing. So as long as you allow your mind to crave permanence, when it's not getting what it wants, it'll get angry and frustrated. So the care is not what's causing the emotions. It's the craving, desire, attachment that's causing that. When you get rid of the craving, desire, attachment, you won't have the emotions, but you'll still have the care. That's the reason why I share these teachings with you guys, because I care about you. But I'm sorry, if you got hit by a truck tonight, I wouldn't be upset. I wouldn't be irritated or frustrated or sad. It's unfortunate that that kind of thing has happened, but I'm not attached. I'm not craving permanence where I want somebody to be permanent. I understand whatever they're experiencing, it's a result of decisions that they made, and I'm not holding on and craving for them to be a certain way. But I have care, right? There's compassion there. There's concern for the misfortune of others. There's this loving kindness, this genuine interest in seeing all beings be well. But none of that is what's causing these emotions.
I suppose it's also linked to maybe society and kind of wanting to prove to others. And again, that's craving, I guess. Craving that others see that you care, and then associating that, again, like I said, emotion with care, but that's not necessarily the case.
Yeah, that's something that's called personal existence view. It's a certain type of craving where the mind wants to be perceived by others in a certain way, and you can only be happy if they're perceiving you that way. So one of the big misunderstandings that people have is that it's the emotions that determine whether you have care or not. And if other people are misunderstanding and they don't think that you care, if you have a craving for them to see you and think of you in a certain way, you will be frustrated and angry that they don't think of you in that way. So, for example, like when my mom died, she already knew this, but I didn't go to her funeral. And she knew this before she ever died. She even actually shared it with me when she was our last conversation. She said, "You're probably not going to come to my funeral, right?" And I said, "Yeah, I can't afford to fly all the way back to the USA in order to be able to come to your funeral." She's like, "I understand, no worries," right? So we had this understanding for probably 15, 20 years before she ever died, right? Well, one of the members of my family was really angry that I didn't come back, and they thought that that meant that I didn't care. Well, it didn't matter to me that this family member thought that way because I wasn't trying to be perceived by them in any particular way. If they were angry, I know that I didn't cause that anger. It's their own mind craving for me to do things a certain way. I didn't have a longing, yearning for them to perceive me a certain way. And if they would like to think that way about me, then that's up to them. My mom knew that I cared about her. She knew that I loved her, right? So I don't need everyone else to be able to understand that, right? So the mind's going to have this, what we call personal existence view, where it's wanting other people to perceive you in a certain way. And you can only be happy if they perceive you that way. You've got to get rid of that, where you understand some people are going to think of you as a nice, loving, kind, warm, and gentle person. And there's going to be other people in the world who think of you exactly the opposite, and they despise you. But you understand that that is coming from their mind. It's not coming from your mind.
Thank you. That's really helpful.
Yeah, you're welcome. Okay, I don't see any other questions anywhere. So I'm going to just kind of summarize what we've been talking about and wrap up today's class. Is that right effort is taking initiative to eliminate unwholesome aspects of the mind and cultivate wholesome qualities of the mind. So you're going to need to apply the effort to eliminate the unwholesome and cultivate the wholesome. Mindfulness is awareness of mind, awareness of your thoughts, your ideas, and then more detail, the four foundations of mindfulness. Being aware of those bodily sensations, the feelings, the condition of the mind, and the mental objects. And this is something that needs to develop over time. You're not going to be able to snap your fingers and instantly go out there and implement these things. So all of these factors are being developed together. Then there's right concentration. This is practicing your meditation, developing that on a daily basis. That's like exercising the mind and preparing it with these qualities that you need. And then there's the singleness of mind, where you're doing just one thing at a time. And over time, what you'll get to is the point where you're experiencing the jhanas. These are enhanced qualities of mind that are developed to the point where you're then able to move your mind further into the 4 stages of enlightenment, which is what I'm going to talk about next week. Next week, we're going to talk about the 10 fetters. These are the 10 pollutions that the Buddha discovered and how to uproot those. And then we're going to talk about the 4 stages of enlightenment, how the mind actually moves through these 4 stages. So I'll just end the way that I typically do by thanking all of you guys for joining. Thank you for your interest in learning and practicing the teachings of the Buddha. I appreciate all of you guys back at Chiang Mai who are opening up the temple and making it available for people there. I'm going to be teaching again on Wednesday morning at Wat Tung. I'm not going to be there physically, but I'll be there remotely. I'm going to be gone until the 24th of September. So I'm still going to be teaching back at Wat Tung, but just doing it remotely, thanks to the students who are there. So whatever you choose to do today, have a very lovely and wonderful rest of your day. Perhaps I'll see you next time. Take care. Sawadee ka.
Thank you again for watching. Enjoy your meditation. Look forward to seeing you online and answering any questions that you might have. Thank you so much.